Alright guys, another episode again with me and the Ginger Professor here. Today we're going to go through ankle mobility. So obviously in things like a squat, even the deadlift, and obviously especially more so in weightlifting movements and things like that, ankle mobility is very, very important. So it's often overlooked, maybe for some good reason, because obviously the hip mobility, for example, is more usually a problem or a I guess detrimental sort of joint compared to an ankle, right? But that doesn't mean the ankle should be overlooked and ignored in itself. So we'll go through today with Alex. We'll talk about how to know if your ankle is immobile in the first place for what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to do. And then once you identify that it's the mobility is not great, how to then go about fixing it. So Alex, let's do it.
Yeah, so ankle mobility, it's one of those things that can be sometimes overlooked with a lot of lifters, particularly when they're having some issues with their form and then particularly their depth. Because a lot of people have a look around the knees, look around the back, look around the mid-back, look around the hips, and all those things which are far more common than the ankle itself. But it's for those. So this is more for those people who they've worked for a bunch of stuff with their knees, they've watched a bunch of stuff with their hips, and they're just fine, and they're not be able to maintain adequate form or adequate depth, particularly with a squat. Because at the end of the day, the ankle is that first sort of joint that requires a little bit of movement there with the squat, and your feet are the foundation of that squat. So we need that ankle on top of that to be moving effectively so everything else can hit the marks it needs to hit so you can get a good lift and do it with good form. So firstly, probably the best way we'll have a look at is how we actually assess or how we test to see if the ankle range of motion is adequate. We'll use Amir as our dummy here. So all we're going to get Amir to do is we're going to get to keep his heel flat on the ground, and you're going to bend his knee as far forward as you can, trying to tap the wall, keeping the base of his heel on the ground. So we'll just do one. So we'd normally do this with a tape measure.
So how far away am I?
So we're looking as far as possible that you can do. So start nice and close.
Start here.
Yeah, and if you can bend forward and you can tap and hit that knee, perfect. So bring your leg back even further. Good, so that's probably too far, so bring it in till you can find that sort of maximum distance there. So I'd bring it. Yeah, so I'd probably
feel the heel from there. So.
Yeah, so just where the heel stops, perfect. So now we'll get you up, holding that position. So what we'd do in a clinical situation would then measure the distance between the wall and his big toe, and then we'll also then compare that to the other side there. So that's in essence what we'll be looking at doing to assess whether the range of motion is adequate and all that sort of thing. You jump off the wall there now if you like.
Wait, actually while we're here then, I'll compare to the other side. So it should be like roughly the same, right?
Yeah. So if we then have a look on that other side there.
See, that feels pretty easy.
Yeah. Good.
I can probably get that, but I couldn't get that on the other foot.
Yeah, so
this one is a little bit better.
Yeah, so generally we're looking at about 12 centimetres between your big toe and the wall, generally speaking.
12 centimetres?
Yeah, so one thing, and the other important part to note is we want to see it to be equal. So with yourself, although you might have adequate range, then we can see there's probably a little bit of a difference between your right ankle and your left ankle. So and a good way then we can then to try and manage and assess that is we want to try and improve some of the mobility in the ankle. An easy way to do that is using some of the some elastic bands or band work. So what we can do there, we'll demonstrate here, is we've got a nice thick band here. We're putting that basically across the ankle joint there. We're coming forward as far as we can, getting good amount of tension onto that band, and then all simply we're getting you to do is glide that joint. So you're moving backwards and forwards whilst that ankle's under tension there.
Okay, and obviously keeping the heel on the ground.
Yeah, keeping that heel on the ground and driving that forwards.
Over here we're trying to mobilize the joint.
Yes.
Yeah. So how do we know if a problem is because the joint itself is stiff and needs to be mobilized further, or if it's just the tightness? Yeah. And it's just stretching is going to fix it.
You bring a good point there. So with a lot of joint issues, we can basically separate it into two categories. We've got things that are extracapsular or outside the joint, or issues that are intracapsular, so within the joint. So your extracapsular issues, you're looking at your muscle tightness and things like that, and they need to be assessed for. So we can break that down by, we can take that muscle off tension and then assess that range of motion in the ankle joint whilst that muscle's off tension. If we then put the muscle on tension and that range is decreased a lot, you could probably surmise that that muscle and that tightness in that muscle is contributing to that limitation, limitation joint. However, if we find that it doesn't matter if the muscle's on tension or off tension, we're not getting any change of the range of motion, it's more likely to be joint rage or something within the joint that's causing it.
Well, two things with that. Firstly, without having to do that, if somebody's like, you know, just analyzing themselves.
Yep.
If they just feel like there's tightness there, would that warrant that it's probably like a muscular tightness? Firstly, that's the first question. That would be enough?
Not necessarily. So you have to, the range of motion is really important with that one. So you can get people, for example, you get like, we've spoken previously about tendinopathies. So you can get like an Achilles tendinopathy where you're going to get this really tight feeling, particularly first thing in the morning, through the back of your heel there. So you might you'll have that sensation of tightness and that pain at the back of the heel, but you may not necessarily have a reduction in the range of that joint at the same time.
Okay. And the second thing to that is, I see a common problem. It's a very common problem with squats and people who have usually tight ankles, and I assume it's usually a tight ankle problem, where they squat and on the way down, especially just as about to pass parallel, so this happens, the arch collapses in. That's usually an ankle problem, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so how would we go about teaching that?
So in terms of those things, so first is understanding why they do it. So it comes down for the inability to that dorsiflexion, so bringing the sort of toes towards the head, and there's that limited range in here. So consequently, they compensate, and the way they compensate is to roll onto the side, so they can get, relatively speaking, more movement and more range out of it. So this sort of exercise that we did previously is probably a good first step towards improving that range there. Other ones, and we just add body weight. So another simple exercise we could probably look at doing is if we come up to a step, we have that heel flat on their step. So a good second phase exercise after we use the band would be to keep that foot flat on the ground and then stepping down, making sure that heel of this foot here stays where it is.
Is this with the band distraction?
This would be a second one, so not necessarily with the band with this one, but you can add into that as well, to ensure that we're getting good adequate range at this ankle there.
And obviously knee tracking the same.
So working at knee tracking, all those, so you can bring in all those other concepts as you're trying to build it up.
And then would you raise the height of the stair?
So you can look at a higher stair and those sort of things to make it a little bit more challenging. We can also add in a little bit of tension from the band as well. In a clinical situation, in the really early stages, we'll generally be down on our hands assisting with that range to try and manually improve that range of motion in the ankle.
And I guess like you would do that and simultaneously just go and do your squats. And if over time you notice that you're not collapsing in as much as before, then it's done its job, sort of thing.
It's pretty, and as well, we also looked at initial assessment where we basically measured that distance from that wall to that toe, and hopefully we want to see that range obviously increase. So that distance should increase as the ankle improves and does what it needs to do.
Okay, so we're talking about 12 centimeters for that.
About 12 centimeters is what we're looking for.
Once you get to that, your ankle, it's probably not an ankle
it generally
problem
has
anymore.
Good adequate range, and obviously there's a bit of change, but if it's getting that and we're not getting that sort of collapse in, where, I mean, the only other sort of alternative there, if we're getting that sort of collapse in there and the hips and knees are all nice and firm, is that sort of flat foot where we don't actually have adequate control through the muscles in the foot, but we can talk about that.
That's a whole different thing. Okay. Hopefully that helps you guys out. If you have any questions, ask us. Remember to use the hashtag AskAdonis, and me, Alex, or any of our other coaches will be on board to answer it. Until next time.
See you guys then.
Stuck. So anyway, after we posted the video, I asked him to send through a video of his bench press anyway, just so we could see